everyone. Welcome to Sober Vibes. I'm your host, Courtney Anderson. I'm a sober coach, author, and your go-to guide with living life without alcohol. I've been alcohol-free since 2012, and by far it's the best decision I've ever made in my life. Now I get to help other women live life without alcohol and thrive in sobriety. Here you're going to find quick sober tips, real talk, and encouragement to build confidence, handle cravings, and really actually enjoy your alcohol-free life. If you're sober curious, ready to go all in, hit subscribe and let's vibe sober together. Hey, welcome back to the Sober Vibes podcast. I am your host and sober coach, Courtney Anderson. You are listening to episode 248. I have such a wonderful guest today, Sarah Treacy. She is the founder of the Sobriety is a New Epic speaker series that is coming out in a couple weeks. So, Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I know. So we talked last week, so I'm very excited. I was on that was your first one, right?
In April, yeah.
Yeah, in April, that was your first one, and your second one is coming up. But before we get into that, why don't you share with us when you got sober, kind of what brought you up to that date where you finally said enough was enough?
Yeah. I actually got sober during COVID. So I know for many, it was pretty common. You either started to see your drinking increase or you kind of made that decision to get healthy and kick it to the curb. And so I was part of that latter group. I've always really been a big social partier. My problem with drinking was that I didn't have an off switch. Once I started, I couldn't shut it down. And that obviously would eventually come to get me into a bit of trouble. The negative consequences certainly started to pile up, but I did have this successful corporate career that was helping me validate that it wasn't so bad. Of course, when COVID hit and I could kind of push the boundaries a little bit on what I could get away with. I no longer had to drive into work in the morning. I could have my camera off. I was taking liberties that were starting to be a bit concerning. And because I had really protected my career at all costs, I never let those two worlds ever collide. Once I started to see that that was a very real possibility, it scared me enough to make the decision to finally quit. So several red flags and obvious moments in the past where I probably should have made that decision as well. But it wasn't really until I saw the potential that I might lose what I had worked so hard to accomplish in my career that I finally decided to end it.
So I do have this question for you because my love for alcohol started when I turned 19 and I was able to go over to Windsor and drink. As soon as you hit 19 in Canada, how was that for you? I just want to touch, because in the States, the drinking age is 21. So
it was actually, I grew up in Montreal, which was 18, so earlier.
Even earlier.
Yeah, well, and you know what? I was in boarding school since the age of 13. So that was definitely a place where drinking started even earlier than the legal drinking age. So I had really been drinking since I was maybe 14, 15 years old.
Yeah, and majority of us drink before that age, but it is like culturally, because too of Canada being like how in like the Midwest, the East Coast, weather-wise, it's cold, right? Like, so for you growing up, was drinking a part of the culture?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it was. I was really more of a kind of rebellious kid. I gravitated towards mischief and attention seeking. And I think that it was just, we were in a small town. There wasn't a whole lot else to do there in our free time. And so we started partying. I didn't necessarily grow up with it per se in my family. My mother wasn't really a drinker. So it really was more of something I did on my own as I left home with my friends.
Yeah. All right. So you quit drinking in 2020. which congrats, because I think that was a great time for anybody to use that time to, I know a lot of people went one way or the other, but
Mhm.
it was a good time for people to quit because nobody had any social obligations, especially for women too. There's a lot of socialness for us involved with drinking. So over the last 4 or 5 years at this point, I would say 5 years, yes, at this
5
point.
years, yeah.
Yes, okay. But you said those first 4 years, really, you had to start taking on that sober identity and that it took you 4 years. So
Mhm.
explain to the good people in the world why it took you, because it does take some time. But for you, what was that experience like on shifting that identity?
Yeah, well, like you said, that during COVID, it really was a perfect time for me to do this one because I wasn't tempted by all these social
Yeah.
gatherings that were happening. I could keep it really private. I did do a program, but it was online. It was one of the first of the programs that, I didn't have to disrupt work. I could go to work during the day and then do this program in the evening. So it really was the only way I think I was ever going to get sober. I really did need that individual time to
Yeah.
focus on myself and really get to know myself again, work through a lot of the things that were maybe holding me back and making me do some of the things I was doing. But ultimately, realize all those amazing firsts that help you to realize all the things you thought were going to happen
Hmm.
weren't actually going to be the case. So when the world started to get back together again in real life, I wasn't ready to fully divulge what I had done during that time, but I got healthy during COVID. And
Yeah.
one of the things I did was stop drinking, and I really realized a lot of great benefits. And so I've decided just to keep it going.
Hmm.
And I think that kept people at bay for a period of time. And there was a lot of curiosity, of course, but so much of the world had already started to embrace this idea of leading a healthier lifestyle and not being so shocked when they heard that people weren't drinking anymore. So that also really helped. I would order mocktails and hope that people would just think it was an alcoholic beverage. And I just wanted to keep it really private. I didn't want sobriety to define me at
Hmm.
all. I really just got right back into my normal, regular life with most of the same people. And I had accepted that alcohol and me could no longer be. And so I was okay for a period of time, not really letting sobriety define me.
Was there a shift where then, because I have found that people are very hesitant with not letting sobriety define them. However, it is a defining moment in a person's life because
Mhm.
it really is, it's a line, right? And when you step over the line and you then start living in that and become the authentic version of yourself, there is that defining moment of like, I don't ever want to go back to who I was before. So I
Yeah.
do find in the beginning a lot of people repel it and don't because they don't want it to be their identity, right? Like, and it's not the case, but it is this what it is. Instead of letting sobriety define you, it's a precious boundary you will never cross with yourself, and that is what it becomes. So I'm
Mhm.
just wondering of where was your mindset? Was that the mindset of you were scared what other people would think, or that was just your belief?
Yeah, I would eventually come to realize that I still harbored a lot of shame and
Yes.
embarrassment around being somebody who had to quit drinking.
Hmm.
I didn't see it yet as the
Hmm.
superpower that it is. For the first little bit, I was in love with sobriety. There was nothing that I was personally embarrassed about, but I wasn't necessarily convinced that the rest of the world would see it the same way.
Right.
And as I mentioned, I really didn't want anyone to come to the conclusion on their own that I had a problem, especially in the professional world. But what ultimately started to happen to me, and I think it happens to many, as I started to go through year 1, 2, 3, I started to plateau a bit and I started to notice misalignment in other
Hmm.
areas of my life. So that career that I protected at all costs because it was that single thing that made me convinced that I wasn't a complete screw up,
Mhm.
it started to mean less to me because now I
Mhm.
had all these other reasons to prove that I wasn't a complete screw up. So I really started to notice that I didn't really care about climbing the corporate ladder. And I was really aware of the fact that maybe my career wasn't giving me that purpose or meaning. I wasn't giving back in a way that I think a lot of us in sobriety want to ultimately do.
Mhm.
And then I also started to notice a bit of a gap in my social life. Like I said, I just started to continue to hang out with the same people just as a non drinker. But I wondered about what it would be like to hang out with other sober people.
Mhm.
But I didn't know how to do that. I was convinced that being part of a sober community meant sitting around talking about how terrible sobriety was and how boring and how much they miss drinking. And I just didn't relate with that. So
But is
it's
that
it,
something that you experienced, or that's something that was a judgment you had in your head? Because this is important.
yeah,
Just for because I do believe that people once they cross that line, right, and they start living in it, it's those judgments that and opinions that they hear from others, and they take that on themselves without actually going in and participating in something like that.
yeah, that's exactly what it was. I
Mhm.
had all of these preconceived notions
Mhm.
about what it was like. And because I didn't know anybody else that was sober in my life, I couldn't even really ask. And so I was actually, I hadn't even been on sober Instagram yet. So I just started to do a little bit of digging. I started to come across different sober Instagram accounts. I started reading articles. Many, like a lot more articles were coming out at that point of people doing certain things in sobriety. And I came across one on Carrie May, who is the founder of Brave, and she does sober retreats. And she was talking about how she found a way to connect with other sober ladies out in beautiful surroundings, and she called it adventure recovery.
Mhm.
And she said it offered up the ability to kind of let your guard down, not be so faced with someone face to face, having to fill those awkward silences. And there was just something about the way she was describing this experience that really spoke to me. And I was like, what is this? I need to find out more about it. I need to go on a sober retreat like this. Could I? Like, that would
Mhm.
be really going outside of my comfort zone. I looked everywhere in Canada to see if there was a place I could go here, and there wasn't. So I did it. I packed my bags and I went. I traveled all the way across the continent to Utah and spent the weekend with a bunch of sober ladies I'd never met before.
Right, and then in that experience, it was totally changed your mind of, "Okay, this isn't like how I thought this was gonna be."
100%. I
Mhm.
was so nervous. I had to fly into Vegas, so it was like a 3 hour drive, and
Mhm.
the whole drive there, I'm like, should I turn back? I don't know if I could do this. This is so awkward, and how am I going to get through it? And then, honestly, within moments of walking through the door and seeing everybody else that was there, it was just this unspoken, instant acceptance and understanding. And yeah, it was a beautiful experience. I, for the first time ever, belly laughed
Oh.
sober. I never thought
Mhm.
that was
Mhm.
possible. We just had the most fun, and it was a total game changer. I really didn't know what I was missing until I went and experienced that. And then I realized in that moment as well that I needed to bring more experiences like this back to Canada,
Mhm.
because if I was new to this, there was probably many other people who would be as well and could benefit in the same way that I did.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing and of going to do something like that. And kudos to you because that like what I heard in the beginning, there was anxiety towards that, right? And anybody would, because when you come from the drinking world of so many years, what it does is make your own world small and ruin self-esteem and self-trust and whatnot. So, like putting yourself out there in this whole new experience is anxiety ridden in the best possible way.
Mhm.
So,
It's
are
nervous excitement, right? So I think anything that gives you that feeling of nerves, I actually chase it now because I have learned in sobriety that that usually means it's something you really want,
yeah.
and you're going to surprise yourself that it is ends up being easier than you thought it was and so much more rewarding.
Yeah. And then it develops, putting yourself in a situation like that too, rebuilds your own self-trust of
Right.
like, I can do a lot. Like even just flying across into another country, like and doing it by myself and
Yeah.
meeting these people, it's another layer of it's another layer of an extremely incredible, important foundation that you're
Mhm.
laying for yourself. Any of those gals you still talk to this day that you met?
Yeah,
Oh,
many
good.
of them. So
Good.
I actually met Heather Lowe out there as well, who
Ah,
ended up becoming a coach of
mhm,
mine. As I mentioned, when I came back, I was like, okay, I'm now very certain that
mhm,
I need a sober community. I don't see one that I could join. That means I probably need to start it myself. And I've already been feeling this nagging that I'm not necessarily as fulfilled at work anymore. And
mhm,
so could this potentially be a career for me? So I sat on it honestly for probably another year. I honestly I plan things to death and get quite paralyzed
mhm,
in that. And so I realized that I needed to reach out to Heather and ask for her help. She
mhm,
has a course that I took to help build a sober business. And doing that, I worked with her and we uncovered in those sessions that I still had a lot of personal work to do in my own recovery. As I mentioned, I still harbored some embarrassment and shame around this idea of having to quit. And when she put that in front of me, it was a bit of a, how are you going to go and help other people if you still can't feel comfortable sharing your story? So then began the work of, okay, how am I going to start getting comfortable with this? So I opened my own sober Instagram account in November. We're almost coming up on a year of that account at the Sober Sherpa.
mhm.
And I committed to every day telling a little bit of my story over the past 4+ years until I could get a little bit more confident. And then I decided that I would do the speaker series to
Mhm.
celebrate my 5 year sobriety and bring a bunch of sober trailblazers together that could help others like me who were still kind of convinced that sobriety was going to be totally boring and
Right,
disconnected
right.
and
Well,
all.
but that's good self-awareness though, but like even in the Heather is actually I just interviewed Heather, so this Heather's interview is coming out the week before
Oh,
yours. So,
great.
and we actually talk about sober coaching in that. So, but that's but the I this is the thing of not even there's a healing process that you have to do within yourself. Like I waited 6 years to even step foot really and in doing this. And I do think it's important for people to wait. That is just my opinion. It might be unpopular to some, but I don't think that anywhere in that first year or two of putting yourself in that situation because there's work you really do have to work on yourself first. Because how can you still talk about asking people to kind of lead by example when you're still carrying shame around yourself for your own drinking? So
Exactly.
I think that's so important for people to work on yourself before then you can open up a world and start helping others because it's something that you do need to get right because it also could eventually down the road cause some imposter syndrome where you're like I'm struggling with this but this is what I'm preaching about. So I think
Totally.
that that's great that Heather was in your life at that time and was able to you guys were able to recognize that and move forward and for you to work on that especially. So what would be like 3 tips? Because the sober identity, it takes some time. It
It's true.
takes some time to actually get used to that because in your drinking days, I mean, we're talking about really years of alcohol being in your life.
Hmm.
Of you being like, "This is who I am," and your identity is wrapped up to into alcohol. Like, when I get home, I have a glass of wine. For some people, it's like I was the party girl, right? So, what would be 3 tips you could share with people to help with the embracing the sober identity process?
Yeah, I have obviously what worked for me, and as you mentioned, everybody is different and they have a bit of a different timeline, but I'm
Mhm,
kind of in your camp where I think you do need to spend a couple years really getting to know yourself again,
mhm,
yourself, re-fall in love with yourself, date yourself, all of those
mhm,
things. The big thing I started with was journaling. It was a form of self-therapy that was instrumental, I think, in my growth. I used books to kind of help spark what I might write about that morning, but it was every single morning I would wake up, I would read a passage in whatever book I was reading, and then I would write. And throughout that process, I was able to uncover a lot of the things that were barriers in my life. I was able to let go of a lot of harbored resentment and anger and things that were definitely holding me back. So journaling was really, really helpful. I know therapy works for a lot of people. I'm not necessarily somebody that can get in that place of talking at this particular time in a calendar date that I have an appointment. So I'm quite personal too with those sort of things. So journaling was a really great option for me. The reading, I think, was a good complement of that too, because I did learn so much through other people and what they were going through. And so that really helped me. I really benefited, as we talked about, having a sober coach and getting some support in taking the next step. And then I think just trust yourself and get uncomfortable. It feels so weird and hard at first, but it gets easier. And it's really rewarding when you actually come out on the other side. And at the point that you've already sort of tackled sobriety, which is maybe one of the hardest, each thing after that does sort of seem like it gets easier. But yeah, just believe in yourself and keep trying new things, experiment and figure out what you're really passionate about.
Yeah, because when you go through those, and those were all great suggestions, when you go through those, again, there's that healing process within yourself. And then becomes the alignment where it's like, then there becomes decisions, like even how you said about your career, where you're like a couple years in, you're like, this isn't aligning with who I am at this point.
Right.
And like so many people have that with jobs. It takes sobriety out of the equation where they go to college. This is what they thought they wanted to do, right, for the rest of their lives. And then 10, 15, 20 years down the road, it's like, I am a shell of a human being. I am miserable. This is not what I want to do because guess what? There was an evolution of you that took place. And my hope is more and more people catch up with that and give themselves grace of like, yeah, what I wanted 20 years ago at the age of 24 is not what I want now. I'm not even the same person. We have lived, like
A long
just
time. There's
right.
many seasons, many chapters. I actually love that sobriety specifically forces us to continue to reevaluate if we're still in alignment and if we're still on the right path. We have to constantly be challenging ourselves and growing just to stay sober, for me anyways. At the point that I feel like I've just kind of don't have anything I'm working towards is a time that is slippery where I'm concerned. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think constant evolution.
Well, share with us about the speaker series. So again, what was it that you were like, okay, I'm ready? You kind of mentioned it before, but kind of re-mention like why you decided to create it because it's a great series. It truly is. It's great what you're doing with that.
Yeah, so I noticed that there were a lot of resources that out there to help people get sober and maybe not necessarily a whole ton on how to stay sober. I really wanted to change the conversation around all of the storytelling seemed to be about why they had to get sober and less about now that I'm sober, this is what I've been able to do and I'm living my best life. And then ultimately use that to convince those like myself who were convinced their life was going to be over if they stopped drinking. So I went out and I sought out several sober trailblazers who had been doing it for many years. And the first one was really inspiration focused, telling stories and getting people to kind of think about sobriety differently. So there were people who conquered bold challenges, people who had started thriving communities, and then of course those that ultimately turned their sobriety into a meaningful career. Since then, I really wanted to take it one step further. This
Mhm.
next series gets a lot more into the weeds, providing practical tips and tools for building resilience and managing emotions and cravings. You'll hear from experts on topics like nutrition and sobriety, navigating change, gaining confidence in your new sober identity, like we've been talking about, introducing more trailblazers who have built thriving sober communities, and we'll share why connection is essential in lasting recovery and what options are available there. And then, of course, I've got a few in there that are going to talk about discovering your purpose and building meaningful service-driven careers in sobriety. So I I really want to help people achieve the success and happiness that all of the speakers have realized in their sobriety.
Yeah, yeah, because you do discover a purpose in you, or one that you thought of years prior, right?
Mhm.
Like what I'm doing now and have been for the last when I started this, I always wanted that when I was before my addiction got really heavy. Like even towards the last couple of years there, I would sit in the pain clinic I was working at, and I'm like, this is not what I want to be doing, right? Like even
Mhm.
too, because I was working in the pain clinic for like 2 years, 2 years into my sobriety, and you have that wake up moment and that clarity where you're like, this is not what I want to be doing. And it comes through. There are so many people who I know who got sober who have started not even communities. Okay, let's take that off the table, but have started businesses from just the creativeness in them, like a jewelry line, or like I had a friend who went into real estate and has done very good into real estate, like because you have that drive and that creativity and the clarity coming through. The world is your oyster. And I will say it again, and majority of people with drinking problems are the smartest human beings on planet Earth.
I did read that recently as well, and I couldn't agree more.
They're the most intellectual, and like sometimes too, when you think about that, so good people of the world listening, when you think about that, highly intelligent people
Yeah.
who are probably why of the coping with alcohol is probably to turn it off. Just
Mhm.
your thoughts of just like to turn it off because you see the world a little bit differently, right? Like, I mean, don't you ever catch yourself thinking like now, like catch yourself into deep thoughts where it's like, oh my God, it is a Tuesday at 1 o'clock. Get it together, Courtney. I don't need to think about this currently right now. But do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like they're so the businesses that come out and how people just like 100 times their potential after getting sober, it's one of the greatest things that you can ever witness in a human
Yeah.
being. So,
I totally agree. And you do believe in yourself a lot more
mhm.
eventually, even if it doesn't come right away, of what you're capable of. And when you put your mind to something, more often than not, you will achieve it. But I have noticed that there is a bit of a shift. And instead of sort of this desire or marker of success being tied to a dollar value, it's so much more on what impact you can make and those that you can help and be of service to. It's just so much more rewarding than filling the bank account.
Yeah. Well, when I got sober too, I was very much a materialistic person, and then a couple of years into my sobriety when I had a shift, and that was more of working towards on emotional sobriety, and that my
Hmm.
shift in perspective changed because I realized too the materialistic stuff was tied more into a family culture of
Yeah.
mine since I was born into and what my parents believed, and I took that on. And like now it's like, I mean, I I just like the stability. I don't what I'm wearing currently, like it this was a $20 jogger suit. I just like it doesn't that
That's
my
not enough.
level of happiness is
Yeah.
not a Gucci bag. To each their own if you like brand labels and stuff, but it's just that there's a evolving in your life of like what is important and what is not.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Even too, I recently saw something on the gram where it was like this mom was talking about she was like my level of success, and she owned her own, I think she owns her own t-shirt company, and she was like of being able to pick up my child at 3.
Yeah.
And that again. why I have a business that I can work from home from. It's because of the vision I saw of myself of being able to do that, to
Yeah.
be in my kid's life, right? So like that's success for me able to put the laptop away at 2:45 and go pick him up from school. Like that's success to me. Truly.
Yeah, 100%.
Mhm.
What is the lifestyle you want to leave? What are your values? What's important to you? And if you are fortunate enough to build a career around that, you're
Mhm.
living a dream.
Yeah. Yeah. So when does the speaker series start?
We start on November 10th. Registration opens at the end of October. And yeah, it will run for 2 weeks. I release about 2 interviews per day from November 10th through until the 23rd.
And then there's a Facebook group too. When people sign up for the speaker series, and there's a Facebook group you can go into, correct?
Yeah, you can
Okay.
join the Facebook group, and in there, I drop a few nuggets, key highlights on each of the interviews, and try to get a discussion going so that you can meet a community of people who are watching the same interviews, and yeah, hopefully build some sober connections.
Okay. And where can people find you? I will put the link in the show notes below so you can join that speaker series, Good People of the World, and I will put all of Sarah's information. But where can people find you?
So as I mentioned, my Instagram handle is at the Sober Sherpa. I also have a website, thesobersherpa.com. But yes, I would love nothing more than for all of your good people to join the series and check out these great interviews and mini master classes that I've put together. So many amazing tips and tools, and I can't thank enough the speakers like yourself who have given their time. This community is
Mhm.
incredible, always so giving and willing to kind of help impart wisdom and share everything they've learned to help you achieve the most epic sobriety possible.
And do you do retreats then in Canada? Did you start doing some in Canada?
Yeah, it's coming. So I have been renovating with my husband a retreat property we bought earlier in the year. So
Oh, fun.
yeah, we are almost done and ready. So stay tuned to learn of the first few retreats that I'll have planned.
Oh, that's
In
exciting. Can you say where it is? Or
Yeah,
no, are we okay?
it's just outside of Collingwood in the Grey Highlands, which is about 2 hours north of Toronto.
Toronto. Okay.
So, not huge mountains like out west here in Canada, but it's what we have here in Ontario, and it's a beautiful spot, and I can't wait to share it with everyone.
I love it. All right. All right. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and congrats to you on 5 years. That's amazing. And what you have created with your community and the speaker series, because I think that speaker series is much, much needed for the space and for others who are not in the space. Because that's the thing. You don't understand that there's this space exists
Mhm.
until you start trying to quit drinking alcohol, and then you start doing some research and you're like, hell's bells, this whole world just opened up, that I had no idea that there was podcasts, that there were speaker series, that there was a whole section of quit lit books, right? So I think it's great and it's much needed. All right. Well, thank
Great.
you, Sarah. Good people of the world, I hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, keep on trucking and stay safe out there.